So for lesson 4, the first thing we're going to talk about is using a number line to round a number. So first of all, when we're talking about rounding a number, we're looking for a number that's close to the number that we're given, but that is a little bit easier to work with. So let's look at this first example. The question says, what is 85,210 rounded to the nearest thousand? Okay, so we first have to look and see what number is in the thousands place. And so in this case, it's the 5. So one strategy to figure out how to round this number to the nearest thousand is to put it on a number line. So if we start with 85,000 on one end, and then 86,000 on the other end, because we're rounding to the nearest thousand. So if I start with 85,000 here, each of these little notches would represent 100. So this would be 85,000, 85,100, 85,200, 85,300, so on and so forth, all the way up to this would be 85,900 and then 86,000. So if I put my number that they have given me, 85,210 would be right about here. And so I can look at the number line and see that 85,210 is closer to 85,000 than it is to 86,000. So what that means is that 85,210 rounded to the nearest thousand is 85,000. Now, let's look at a different way to round. This is the rounding rule, and this is probably something you've seen before. So this is a little bit more of a review. But let's look at this. I like the wording on this because I think it's easy to remember. You may have learned different wording, but I like this because I think it's easy to remember. 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. So let's take a look at what that means in rounding and how we use that rule. Okay, so this time we are given the number 63,290. And we are being asked to round it to the nearest thousand. So instead of using a number line this time, we are going to use our rounding rule. So I've rewritten the number right here, and we are rounding to the nearest thousand. So the first thing I did was to identify the digit in the thousands place. That's step 1 right here. Identify the digit in the thousands place. And in this case, it's a 3. So I put it in red to make it stand out. If you are doing it on paper, you could just put a circle around it to make it stand out so you remember which digit is either going to stay the same or going to soar. So it's either going to soar or rest, meaning it's either going to go up 1 or stay the same. So number 2, it says look at the digit just to the right of the 3. So in this case, it's a 2. So if you have a pencil at home and you're doing it on paper, you might just underline it. I changed it to green and underlined it just so we could stand out. So these are the 2 numbers that are going to be very important in helping us know how to round this number to the nearest thousand. So because we are rounding to the nearest thousand, we know that this 3 is either going to soar, meaning bump up to a 4, or we're gonna let it rest, meaning it's gonna stay as a 3. And the way we determine whether we're gonna do that is to look at the number beside it. So let's look at that 2. If you remember, our rule said 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. So this 2 is less than 4. So that means we're going to just let this 3 rest. We're going to let it stay the same. So what that means is, let me say one more thing, and then we're going to let this rest, and then all these numbers that come after the 3 are going to turn to 0. So what that means is that 63,290 rounded to the nearest thousand is 63,000. We left the 3 the same, we let it rest, and then we changed all the numbers after that to 0. Okay, let's look at one more example. Okay, using the rounding rule again, but this time it's asking us to round to the nearest 100. So we're going to use the same rule and do the same process, except this time we're rounding to the nearest 100 instead of the nearest 1,000. So I'm going to use my red to identify which number is in the hundreds place. In this case, it's a 2. I'm going to look to the number right beside it to determine whether that 2 is going to bump up or stay the same. Is it going to soar or is it going to rest? So because that 9 is greater than 5, and remember our rule said 5 or more, let it soar, meaning let it go up. So because this number is greater than 5, that means this 2 is going to bump up to a 3. And then all the numbers after it are going to change to 0. So what that means is 63,290 rounded to the nearest 100 is 63,300. So we changed that hundreds place. We bumped it up to a 3 because this was a 9, and then we made the other digits after that into a 0. In the next lesson, we are going to learn how to use rounding to estimate numbers.